This is Vietnam. In February 1965, the president orders limited airstrikes against selected military targets in the north. As with generations before them, these American fighting men have been called away from their homes off to a distant land to engage in a bitter and bloody struggle, this time against the aggressive forces of communist North Vietnam and the Viet Cong. In the swamps and jungles, American soldiers carry out their orders, locate and defeat the guerrillas and terrorists of the communist Viet Cong. The American mission, peace, an honorable end to the conflict, ensuring the continued sovereignty of South Vietnam. Twice before in this century, American servicemen have led the fight for freedom in both Europe and in Asia. Now, as before, the price of peace in the face of imperialist aggression is high.
Hot damn Vietnam.
We offer full moral support to all men of draft age who refuse military service.
My objection to it is that I don't know of very many flags which have been so often prostituted as this one.
Well, I think it's time to start organizing for the next one, when maybe we will block him and he can't get into his White House.
I intend to support the Constitution of the United States. I will not fight in Vietnam.
While brave men are dying in the battle to stop communist aggression abroad, here at home, Americans are witnessing demonstrations, teach-ins, and draft card burnings conducted by a wide variety of groups and individuals united under a common banner which they call the peace movement. The purpose of this film is to help you analyze, discuss, and evaluate this highly vocal and at times even militant minority, one which is likely to become even more vocal and militant in the months ahead. To do so, we must first identify some of the activist elements involved. One organization prominent in the so-called peace movement is the W.E.B. Du Bois Clubs of America, described by FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover as one of the most ambitious communist youth movements in years, an illegitimate spawn conceived by the Communist Party. Formed in June of 1964, its leaders include Bettina Aptheker, an avowed Communist Party member, and Eugene Dennis Jr., the son of a former secretary of the Communist Party. Its publication is called The Insurgent. Even more militant is the Progressive Labor Party, organized in New York, July 1st, 1962, by a group expelled from the Communist Party for being too extremist. Its publications include Challenge, a weekly newspaper, and PL, Progressive Labor, a monthly magazine. Its members were instrumental in establishing and controlling another group, the May 2nd Movement, or M2M, founded at Yale University in March of 1964. Infiltrators into the M2M report that it has actively solicited aid for the communist troops fighting in Vietnam. Its publication is called The Free Student. Two other militant leftist groups are the Workers' World Party, a Trotskyite organization, and its youth affiliate, Youth Against War and Fascism. The largest, most powerful Trotskyite group is the Socialist Workers' Party, which publishes this weekly newspaper, The Militant. Its youth group, the Young Socialist Alliance, publishes this monthly magazine, The Young Socialist. Militant extremists expelled from the Socialist Workers' Party in 1964 have formed still another group known as Spartacist, which publishes this bi-monthly newsletter of the same name. Students for a Democratic Society, formed in 1960, has been extremely active in organizing demonstrations and urging resistance to the military draft through acts of civil disobedience. In 1965, SDS members voted to permit communists to join and serve in leadership capacity. For this action, they were severely chastised by their parent organization, the League for Industrial Democracy. Also active in the peace movement are Women Strike for Peace, which welcomes communists as members and leaders, the Committee for Nonviolent Action, whose members have refused to serve in the Vietnam War, the Student Peace Union, the Catholic Worker, the War Resisters League, the Committee for a Sane Nuclear Policy, and many others. Members of these many diversified elements, communists, Trotskyites, socialists, pacifists, and liberals, have joined together in a united front for what they call peace. Anti-American, an internal threat, extremist, giving aid and comfort to the enemy, you be the judge as you witness the peace movement in action.
This is the University of California, a major staging ground for radical leftist demonstrations and meetings. Nearly 10,000 students attend a marathon 32-hour teach-in featuring speeches by Alaska's Democrat Senator Ernest Greening, Levi Lee Laub, a leader of the Progressive Labor Party, and Mike Meyerson, the International Secretary of the W.E.B. Du Bois Clubs, who proudly displays a ring made from the tail of an American jet plane shot down in Vietnam by communist gunfire. Stoughton Lind, a Yale University professor, urges the gathering to commit acts of civil disobedience so massive that our top government officials will have to resign. Both Norman Thomas and Norman Mailer reserved their sharpest attacks for the president himself.
He is developing what he may not have himself, the worst possible imperialist attitude, the worst possible self-righteous attitude, and the worst possible indifference to human blood. You play this chess game with forms who bleed, and we've been doing it for God knows how many years.
The president needed another issue. Then it came to the president. Hot damn Vietnam. Vietnam, that little old country which had been under his nose all these years. Things were getting too quiet in Vietnam. If there was one thing hotter than Harlem in the summer, it was air raids on rice paddies and napalm on red goose.
During the summer months, the protests are accelerated in their intensity. In early August, students from the Berkeley campus learn that one of the major points of embarkation for troops destined for Vietnam is in nearby Oakland. On several occasions, radical leftists lead contingents of students in attempts to block trains carrying military troops into the Oakland base. Police guards clear demonstrators from the tracks and escort the train through the protesting crowds.
The first experiment in massive civil disobedience in connection with the Vietnam War protest is initiated the next day in the nation's capital. Weeks before, a call has gone out through various militant leftist publications announcing a 3-day demonstration climaxing on Monday, August 8th, with a march toward the Capitol with the intention of convening in the chamber of the House of Representatives where a declaration of peace will be read. Coordinating headquarters for the demonstration is set up at the Washington offices of SNCC, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, and the signers of the call include Carl Blois, a correspondent for the Communist People's World and publications director of the W.E.B. Du Bois Clubs, Stoughton Lind, the Yale professor, David Dellinger, formerly associated with the Fair Play for Cuba Committee and currently a sponsor of the Radical Committee for Nonviolent Action, and Carl Oglesby, the leader of the Students for a Democratic Society. The 3-day protests begin with an attempt by the demonstrators to enter the grounds of the White House. When stopped by police, they're advised by their leaders about their next course of action. A.J. Musty of the Committee for Nonviolent Action.
There has been discussion already of a much larger scale attempt on the part of a great many more people to put the thing up to the president himself and to commit civil disobedience continuously if he will not, as a matter of fact, see American people rather than a group of small delegates.
We were debating whether or not to stay a few more hours or whether to stay all night or whether to leave now, and I feel that the point we made is, has been made. There's no sense in staying around, and I just say that I thought the president probably didn't give a damn whether we stayed here all night. That by that I meant that I think he's probably gone somewhere else and that we're not blocking traffic here, so there's no real point in anybody staying on any longer.
I think you're logical. Good. You got your point across.
Well, I think it's time to start organizing for the next one, when maybe we will block him and he can't get into his White House.
I doubt if that will ever happen.
I am inclined to agree with Joan that the better part of political intelligence at this point is to figure that we have made about as much impact as we will make if we should, for instance, stay another couple hours or even all night, that I would like to see those people who have spoken so cogently on the need for civil disobedience, I would like to see them speaking in the workshops tomorrow. And then the final reminder is that on Monday, there will hopefully be more civil disobedience at the Assembly for Unrepresented People. And I hope that out of the workshops we'll develop plans for civil disobedience on Monday of that character. And I hope that since we are apparently spared from going to jail today, I hope that as many as possible of us will be able to be present at that time recommitting civil disobedience.
The next day, demonstrators picket the White House. Later, they proceed to the workshops where discussions range from the war to the campaign to abolish the House Committee on Un-American Activities. While on the other side of the globe, South Vietnamese Rangers proudly display the flag of their communist Viet Cong enemy, a flag which they had just captured after a long and bloody battle. Several participants in the Washington demonstration attract attention by planting the same banner near their literature table in the shadow of the Washington Monument. The group identifies itself as the Committee to Aid the National Liberation Front, the political front for the communist Viet Cong. The committee's chairman explains the purposes of his organization.
The purpose of this committee is to advise people in this country who feel that the war in Vietnam is unjust and feel that the government's killing of people in Vietnam should cease, on how they can send money to the National Liberation Front for purposes of medical aid.
Now, what is the feeling here? Will you actually be sending money to people to help support people that our Marines are fighting?
Well, the committee will not be sending any money to the National Liberation Front ourselves. We will be advising people who want to do it on their own to do it on their own. We simply will be selling our buttons which advise support the National Liberation Front and telling people where they can send the money by registered mail too.
Confirming Teague's statement, this announcement appears in a subsequent issue of Spartacist, urging readers to support the National Liberation Front by sending money to an address in Prague, Czechoslovakia. The announcement then states that more information can be obtained by writing to Walter Teague in care of the Committee to Aid the National Liberation Front at a New York City address. In a subsequent interview, a leader of the Students for a Democratic Society admits his group's role in the anti-draft movement.
Now, the Students for Democratic Society has taken a stronger position on this. I think you yourself and representatives of your organization have actually urged people to burn up their draft cards, tear up their draft cards, and not comply with the draft. Is that true?
Right. We would urge people to have nothing to do whatsoever with all the machinery of the war, but more than that, try to take the idea of resistance into the communities and organize around it. Poor communities, Negro and white communities, trade union locals, even the suburbs and working class communities around New York City. People are trying to find ways to open up the dialogue on Vietnam that has been missing on the street level and on the corner level. And that is being done in a number of places this summer.
The next morning, the march to the Capitol begins. A Presbyterian minister participating in the demonstration explains his presence.
Well, I represent the Protestants at the Columbia University in New York City. I'm marching simply as a human being who doesn't want to get blown up.
Sponsors of the demonstration include Russ Nixon, managing editor of the National Guardian newspaper, who has been identified on 5 occasions as a member of the Communist Party in sworn testimony before the House Committee on Un-American Activities. Both he and Donna Allan of the Women's Strike for Peace, another sponsor of the demonstration, were cited for contempt of Congress for their refusal to testify at a 1964 committee hearing. As the demonstration nears the Capitol grounds, the marchers are warned by police officials twice that if they proceed, they will be subjecting themselves to arrest. Singing, "We shall not be moved," the marchers continue. The procession is suddenly interrupted as members of the National Socialist Workers' Party, the Nazi Party, rush forward, shout invectives, and throw red paint on the demonstration leaders. Despite the interruption, David Dellinger and Stoughton Lynn moved the march closer to its destination. Further warnings by the police have no impact on the marchers as they continue on to the Capitol grounds, where they are stopped by a line of Washington police and are warned again. Stoughton Lynn announces to the demonstrators that they will continue and suffer arrest, and the marchers attempt to push their way through the police lines.
We are prepared to face arrest. Several hundred of us, I think, will continue at this point. We will not let ourselves become a mob. We will proceed in a quiet and dignified way and suffer arrest if need be.
When stopped by the police, the demonstrators sit down on the sidewalk in what they call passive resistance. Stoughton Lynn, the Yale professor, is among the first to be arrested. Later, he is joined by David Dellinger, and ultimately, before the afternoon is over, by more than 250 others. The arrested marchers are loaded into paddy wagons and police buses and escorted off to police headquarters. In an attempt to block the buses, several demonstrators lie down in front of the wheels. Complaints of police brutality are heard as they are removed and carried away. A steady flow of wagons and buses keeps pace with the 3-hour-long arrests that take place. Awaiting arrest, the demonstrators read their declarations and make their speeches.
U.S. intervention in Vietnam is against the interests of the vast majority of the American people.
I intend to support the Constitution of the United States. I will not fight in Vietnam.
The whole world, everybody in France, England, in Ghana, in Vietnam, in Cuba, in Russia, the whole world are watching us right now. Further, the arbitrary centralization of decision-making constitutes a most serious erosion of the democratic right of the American people to discuss and decide the questions of war and peace. The war stimulates the most reactionary elements of this country, raising the ugly threat of McCarthyism.
The United States and of the world, but particularly the United States, is not whether they are overthrown, but whether they repent, whether they change in order to keep us all from being destroyed.
That's what I'm saying. Give me a chance, will you? We're more orderly, we're more together, we're more disciplined, we're more engaged, and we're more effective now than we were. We had all the guys who organized it, and that is the proof, I think, that we are all leaders, that we all know what we're doing, that we can't have democracy, and you can't pass responsibility around. We lost Stoughton Lynn, we lost Paris, we lost Dellinger, we lost Chandler, and when we had them, we were standing out there, we were looking around, people were splitting up, they were screaming at each other. Now we don't have them, and every single one of us knows exactly what he has to do. The abdication by the Congress of the United States of its right to decide the issues of war and peace, and its support of the Johnson administration's counter-revolutionary war against the Vietnamese people shows that it does not represent the interests of the vast majority of American people, but only a tiny corporate oligarchy.
Take your time, man. Take your time.
From the demonstrators' point of view, their first venture into massive civil disobedience over the Vietnam War is a great success. They are arrested and convicted of violating the law. Many are even imprisoned. According to subsequent news reports, two of the leaders, Stoughton Lind, on the right of your screen, and Tom Hayden, leave the United States on December 19th, together with Communist Party official Herbert Aptheker, and fly to communist North Vietnam for conferences with communist officials there.
A new type of protest and civil disobedience occurs in New York City at an October 15th rally. David Miller, a member of the socialist-oriented Catholic worker organization, publicly burns his draft card. Barry Bassin, another featured performer at the rally, explains his opposition to the draft.
Barry, why do you object to the draft? Because it is an attempt by the state to make slaves of the citizens. I think if the United States wants an army, it should be a voluntary army. If the people of the United States are willing to defend this country militarily, they should do it voluntarily. Personally, I am not willing to defend this or any other country through military means. Do you think that this country is in danger? I think it's in danger, yes, from the government, from no other source. Have you refused to serve in the Army? Yes, I have.
After going to the speaker's platform, Bassin's opening attack is centered on the American flag itself.
I'd like to start by saying that when I was asked to speak here, I did not know that this flag would be here today. My objection to it is that I don't know of very many flags which have been so often prostituted as this one.
October 15th and 16th are set aside as days for international protest by the militant groups, organized by the Vietnam Day Committee, a Berkeley-based group. Protest demonstrations are conducted in many American and foreign cities simultaneously. Berkeley demonstrators try twice to march through the city of Oakland to the Army terminal there, being stopped on both days by police officials. Among the organizers of the New York City March are Clifton D. Berry, an official of the Socialist Workers' Party, and Levi Laub of the Progressive Labor Party. Even Spartacist is clearly represented. 3 weeks later, the year's most dramatic public draft card burning ceremony is introduced.
We offer full moral support to all men of draft age who refuse military service. We offer full moral support to them whether they engage in burning their draft cards, otherwise non-cooperate with the draft, or seek pacification as conscientious objectors.
Refuse to fight across the sea.
The 5 draft card burners are identified as Thomas C. Cornell, Mark Paul Edelman, Roy Lisker, James Wilson, and David McReynolds. Their ceremony is interrupted briefly by a spectator with a fire extinguisher, but only moments later, the burning continues.
On Thanksgiving Day, delegations from more than 100 radical leftist and pacifist organizations arrive in Washington at the Lincoln Memorial Church, an affiliate of the United Church of Christ, for a 3-day-long convention of the National Coordinating Committee to End the War in Vietnam. Outside the church, the delegation representing the Committee to Aid the National Liberation Front, headed by Walter Teague, arrives and begins to unload bundles of communist North Vietnamese literature and communist flags. Both Teague and an associate proudly display the communist flag for photographers. These same flags are carried in the Saturday March for Peace, organized by the Committee for a Sane Nuclear Policy. The organizers of the march welcome any and all who might wish to join. En route to the Washington Monument grounds, many demonstrators stopped to purchase the latest edition of the Communist Party's Worker, a special issue commemorating the protest demonstrations. Mingling among the demonstrators are members of the extremely militant Spartacist organization, carrying signs blaming American imperialism for both the war in Vietnam and the rioting in the Watts area of Los Angeles. At the Washington Monument, the American flag is casually discarded on the ground by some as they prepare to listen to an afternoon of speeches attacking American foreign policy. An invocation is given by Dr. Edwin Dahlberg.
Will you please stand?
Dr. Dahlberg is a past president of the National Council of Churches.
Almighty and eternal God, We have come together from all parts of our nation to voice what we believe to be the better conscience of the American people.
The first speaker is Dr. Benjamin Spock, a noted pediatrician and author and co-chairman of the sponsoring committee for a sane nuclear policy. Dr. Spock comments,
"It has been futilely trying to impose on South Vietnam a reactionary dictatorship which has never had more than lukewarm support from a small proportion of the citizens."
Following Dr. Spock, the crowd hears speeches by longtime socialist leader Norman Thomas, Professor Joseph M. Duffy, Jr. of the University of Notre Dame, and Congressman George Brown, Jr., Democrat of California. The crowd then hears the last two speakers.
The difference between the bombing of Hanoi and Haiphong and negotiations may well be determined by the number of our demonstrations and their intensity.
What the National Liberation Front is fighting in Vietnam is a complex and a vicious war, and it is also a revolution, as honest as they will ever come. And this is a fact which all our intricate official denials will never change. Can we understand why the Negroes of Watts rebelled? Then why do we need a devil theory for the rebellion in South Vietnam?
In spite of the charges of militant leftists, the facts on the struggle in Vietnam remain clear. The North Vietnamese dictatorship, headed by Ho Chi Minh, has launched clear-cut aggression against the Republic of Vietnam, using the Viet Cong as the military arm of attack and the National Liberation Front as its political apparatus. Repudiated by almost 1 million refugees from communist-ruled North Vietnam, Ho Chi Minh hypocritically calls for liberation of South Vietnam and attempts to disguise his aggression as a civil war. The United States has intervened in accordance with international agreements and at the invitation of the government of South Vietnam. The United States seeks no territory, but rather seeks to protect another nation from communist conquest. Meanwhile, here at home, organizations and individuals involved in the so-called peace movement promise to accelerate their protest against this American policy in the months ahead. You have heard some of their statements. You have seen how they promote what they call peace. You have heard a charge that the president has ordered bombing of North Vietnam as a callous political move to create a diversionary issue. You have heard the American flag denounced in scathing terms. You have seen deliberate violations of law in what is called civil disobedience. You have seen the flag of the communist Viet Cong carried by leftist demonstrators in the heart of our nation's capital. Under orders from the President of the United States and with the overwhelming support of your representatives in the Congress, this flag flies today off the shores of Vietnam. It is carried into the swamps and jungles, a symbol of hope for freedom and justice for those in that besieged nation who are resisting communist aggression. It represents you and your traditions. In every crisis, the American people have always rallied behind it and the brave men who answered its call. And they shall again. As battles roar and brave men fall, not just for the core, those words, duty, honor, country, but for you. And all those who cherish liberty respond, one nation, indivisible.